Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Assassin's Creed, your number one podcast for all things Assassin's Creed. In today's episode, we are doing our fourth?
1, 2, 3, fourth? Fifth. 1, 2, Brotherhood, Revelations, 3. So this is number 5.
See, we've started off in the intro and I can't count. Let's just back up. Welcome to Let's Talk Assassin's Creed, your number one podcast in all things Assassin's Creed. Today we're doing Deep Dive episode 5, which is Assassin's Creed 3. So confusing because it's the third game in the series, but it's actually the fifth game. Maths.
Since when did Assassin's Creed care about numbers and chronological timelines and no?
Well, in my logic, it goes 1, 2, 2.2.5, 2.5, 3. That's how you get technical with me. So this is Assassin's Creed 3, the Great American Revolution between France, English, and Native Americans. A really fun game, and I'm really disappointed to be doing this episode, though.
Okay, why is that? Straight off the bat, disappointed.
Because I can't talk about the remaster, which I prefer over the original.
I mean,
gosh darn it.
Just talking about the gameplay, the story, and things like that, which largely remain the same, so I just don't worry about it too much.
I think when I do talk about this, I have the feeling that Assassin's Creed 3 Remaster, in my eyes, retcons the original, because there's no point playing the original. Play the remaster because it's 10 times better.
I mean, that's generally the point of a remaster, right? If it's a true to life remaster, it's supposed to be an improved version, both kind of graphically and in terms of performance wise.
I agree there. So we'll focus on the original. So I would like to point out, I may drool over Assassin's Creed 3 Remaster, but this score will reflect how I felt back in 2012 when I first played the game. So, who wants to kick off?
Why don't you kick us off?
2012. The year where everybody wouldn't shut up about End of the World. And my biggest issue with the game had to be, and I don't mind it now, but the fine fact the ending was shoehorned into 2012 End of the World.
Yeah.
Well done, Ubisoft. I really like the idea of Desmond's ending, but you had to shoehorn it into, everyone's jumped on the hype train of the Mayan apocalypse. Let's make an American Revolution game that has nothing to do with the Mayan apocalypse, but in the modern day, part of the Mayan apocalypse.
Yeah, I mean,
where's the logic?
There is none. If you're asking where the logic is in the Assassin's Creed modern day stuff, we're going to be here for a long time trying to work that out.
But I know we're not doing the modern day talk to the very end, but it is relevant to the past game because the past game actually makes no mention. It just mentions the vault that you have to hunt for modern day.
Yeah.
In the game, the story felt more connected when you followed it from the Assassins versus Templars over the build up to modern day, which is where I think this game shines. It does really decent story building in just the past that makes you want to go back and play.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. The stories, I wouldn't call it a spectacular story. It's not the worst one in the series so far. It's a long story. There's a lot to get through. And it's, obviously, just by the nature of the beast, it spans quite a large kind of time frame from start to end. Obviously, it starts, talking about kind of inside the Animus, kind of long before Connor's birth, with Hatham and that, era before, and then you have to go through Hatham as a child, Hatham as a bit of an older child, and then as an adult. Of in-game time, it covers a big period, and obviously in that time there's a lot of different kind of historical events that we somehow happen upon and get involved with. But yeah, so it's it was a good story. It wasn't my favourite, but certainly not my least favourite story in the series.
Sorry, I was just getting a drink then. You brought up Haytham, and I will admit, Haytham is my little slash major niggle with Assassin's Creed 3, and it's relevant now speaking to another fellow podcaster, Vision of the Past, because he's read the books, and it kind of like makes me feel a bit sad that you got this really lengthy section as Haytham, then suddenly you're Ranakon Connor. I am not trying that again. You are Connor.
I'll give it a go.
Oh yeah.
I believe it's Rakona Taekon. I think.
Damn it.
Listeners, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that might be right. I haven't played it in a while, but
It's closer than mine, so we'll go with that. But he's expressed that in one of the books after 3, they go into more detail with Haytham, and it's kind of got me sad because it just seems that maybe Haytham was a wasted journey because you played, like you said, such a lengthy story, which was just technically an opener as Haytham, and then I don't understand the transition as much. Like the next thing you know, you're suddenly young Connor, and now it's about Connor.
Well, I think it was supposed to be this kind of big, massive, shock reveal that he's actually a Templar. But anyone who knows what to look for spotted that he was a Templar way before they revealed it. So it was kind of a wasted, slight, like reveal kind of thing. It was a reveal that 99% of us probably saw coming.
It's like when I played it, and I have the same thought now because I did make some questions about it and I challenged it. Was one of the missions with Haytham, you have a lot of your Templar buddies, and they all have Assassin look. And from playing 1, I knew Haytham was a Templar. And I just don't understand why his buddies didn't just have Templar logos. And then it got revealed to me, it was to keep the surprise that Haytham was actually a Templar. And I'm like,
yeah,
but we know he's a Templar.
Yeah, exactly.
He's not dressed like an assassin, for 1. 2, he may have the gauntlets, but he assassinates somebody in a theatre for no reason.
Well, it's like, just everything about him, the way he moves, the way he talks, the way he acts, nothing about it is anything that we're used to from playing as assassins. It's very straight away. I was kind of like, well, he's acting differently, he's speaking differently. I'm supposed to think he's an assassin, but I don't think he is. And then lo and behold, may the Father of Understanding guide us.
I think the biggest point that got me thinking is really an assassin is when you finally get to Boston as Haytham, and you go to the pub and you meet all your friends and you're all gathered around a table, and when you look at the ragtag squad, as I nickname them, they just don't look like they're part of a brotherhood. They just look like people coming for one cause, which didn't reflect assassins, because I don't expect a group of assassins to meet up at the local pub and have a pint to discuss the next Templar overthrow. So it screamed, it wasn't too inconspicuous to be assassins.
Yeah, I think you're right. But, a good idea. I thought it was an interesting idea to have a segment start off with a completely different character than you were expecting, and then try that kind of big reveal. Just didn't work really, unfortunately. But there you go. I applaud Ubisoft when they try something different. If it's a good idea, generally, I think that's a good sign for a developer, publisher, to challenge what you've done before.
And on that term about changing, the biggest change I've had to have been, and the most welcome change, the verticality of movement. You can run through trees. The climbing felt a bit quicker, even though it wasn't, but nothing essentially was unclimbable. You could climb trees and everything, and it just felt more native to the land. If when you're hunting, you're up a tree with a rope dart.
Oh,
That felt better than just walking through
I,
a
I think
bush.
I think like the treetop traversal might be the most satisfying element of the free running in the history of the Assassin's Creed games up to this point. Once I finished the main story, I don't think I returned to the main cities once. I think it was just too much fun to just stay in the frontier, stealthily jumping from branch to branch, hunting my next animal or, waiting for the next convoy to ambush. It was just too fun to not want to do it all the time.
And I think the other great thing that they've done, and I love just adding this in because it's just fun, it added some really in-depth RPG mechanics from the crafting to the convoys for your homestead to your actual homestead missions themselves were all about building this homestead from nothing to everything, and you had to manage your convoy, manage the resources, hunting for stuff. Really didn't understand why if you killed something then left, you would get desynchronized at times because your ancestors used everything. That bugged me, especially with how the aim was fixed back then. It wasn't the free aim from Black Flag. So if you shot someone and hit a rabbit, you had to then go find the goddamn rabbit or you would get decent.
That
And
was probably one of the most infuriating things about this game was it seemed like the game didn't want you to stray off the path in terms of trying to keep you on this linear path, but it will desynchronize you if you try to go and do something different that you're not supposed to do at this very moment in time. And that was a bit of an immersion breaker for me. You give us this huge kind of open world to discover, but you're telling me if I go left instead of right, you're going to give me a game over screen and make me start again.
And I think it's time we seem to be talking pretty nicely about the game, but I think it's time if we look at some of the negatives. And one of the biggest negatives that I'm still seeing now in the remaster, and I've looked at the original, is free proved, and I think Black Flag proved it more, the optional objectives in these games were just stupidly, annoyingly hard at times.
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree. I don't necessarily agree that that's a bad thing. I think it gives completionists something to aim for. It's. I think the key thing is that they're completely optional. If I want to do it, I'll do it. If I don't fancy it, I won't do it. If they'd have made them more kind of, you had to do them, yeah, we've got a massive issue there. But I just think it's an added thing that allows a bit more, it adds a bit more skill and a bit more tactics and a bit more nuance to each level should you want to go that way.
I think on the one hand, I am 100% on board with you, but on the other hand, one that breaks my immersion is since number one, this is the fifth game, we have it drilled in our heads. This is the memory of an ancestor. And to say, like, to get full sync in the memory, you have to do optional stuff. It kind of means, so if we didn't do the optional stuff, how is that affecting a linear memory? Because the assassin would have done them anyways. He would have never hit a tree in that dream sequence. He never would have not used an arrow or got hit in a combat. But because I've chose to get hit, I'm now breaking a memory because this memory is now false because he didn't get hit in the combat. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the optional. And I think that's where I get kind of confused with the optional stuff.
I think you're looking into it far too much.
This is Assassin's Creed. Don't look into it. I'm not being rude. You've got to look into it because
not stuff like that. It's added gameplay features. It's not game breaking in terms of the lore.
But what I mean is, if you look at how optionals was worked by then, and then you look at Odyssey, which uses optionals via choice, it's a similar thing to get full sync and Odyssey memory, for example. which I know there's no sequences, you could do different optional dialect, which may be a bit more in the memory. And that's why I think things have just got a bit murky, if that makes sense, where you are right, it is an added gameplay element, and it's something I've worked on, sometimes ignored. But then when they try and add it on another level, but this time less optional in memory sequence for combat, but choice, it then apparently is immersive and broken, if that makes sense. So where's the
But
line?
then I get what you're saying, but then if we look at it that way, where does it end? If I choose to assassinate someone off of that rooftop instead of that one, it's not an optional objective, but the premise remains the same. If it's a memory, I shouldn't have a choice.
And I think that's what the point I'm trying to make with 3 kind of proved, that for Assassin's Creed as a whole genre, it is always going to be walking that very thin line between keeping the gameplay elements level for everyone. You can't deny that for a completionist, it's good to have more synchronizations. But then the lore heavy side, which makes, well, if you're playing a memory, you shouldn't have optional stuff. And you've got
I
to
think
find
for
that
me,
balance.
the way I've always looked at it is, yes, we're playing a memory. Here's where the memory starts, and here's how it finished. How you get there doesn't matter, because the only important bits of this memory are how it starts and how it ends. Everything in between doesn't matter. It's just filler.
But you can't tell me that some of those filler objectives were just completely bull. If you play the DLCs, do not get hit by enemy cannon fire. You're in a cannon battle. How am I supposed to not get hit? I'm not a miracle worker. But I think my main point for it is I have no major objection to them. I think I have more objection in 4 because a lot of it was just tailing, and I really got bored of tailing. It was just more the fact of when I used to play as a kid, if I missed the whole objectives, I felt like, where did the game then change? When was I actually following the memory correctly? Did I have to do it? And then when they took it out in Unity and made the world more living, that's when I kind of realized Assassin's Creed works more as a living element. You live the world, you play the world, but the optional stuff keeps you more linear at times, if that makes sense, making you walk a set path that actually happened. Whereas the game would work better if it was less linear, but the story was the same.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, and the game is not, is not short of things to do. You've got your main missions, there's side missions, there's collectibles, hunting challenges, homestead missions, training and recruiting assassins. All of these little things just made this world feel so full and like this living, breathing environment that moves on around you. Even if you're not there, it's still living, it's still changing, it's still adapting to the times, and it was such an immersive world to be a part of. I think, and then obviously it brought in the naval combat side of things. It was new, it was appropriately dramatic, and, just the feeling of steering a ship through treacherous seas and battling other ships was really convincing. And an absolute masterstroke to bring that in.
I think it's fair to say 3 was a pioneer, because if we look at where the game is now and where the game was at the start, 3 is the pivotal point where they said, hang on a minute, let's add more vocality to the games, meaning anywhere we go in the world, you can practically free run on anything. And I know people will call out Origins and Odyssey, but they did have a lot of vocalities in them games which were different. The naval probably inspired Black Flag, which is one of the greatest naval games I've played. The Homestead mission inspired the Great Iguana. I think it's Iguana. Can't remember. It's from Black Flag.
Because I remember, because I always used to read it as Iguana as well, and then reminded myself it's not Iguana, it's Inagua.
I remember that one. And then there's the train hideout from
Yeah.
Syndicate, and the Theatre of Unity all started from free. So essentially, free is a pivotal point in the game, and I think I get annoyed by the optional objectives the most in games because of there's too much to do. Like, and especially how free is structured, like you said before, how linear it is, and you want to just go collect the feathers, and say, "Oh no, you have not unlocked
Yeah.
mission
Memory
9
sequence
yet."
9.
You, and it's like, yeah, and you just thought, but and I mean, Black Flag was the most one that gritted
Oh
my
yeah,
teeth
especially when
for
you
that.
need to. You're saying it. Oh, we'll get onto it more next week. But sailing the boat to get to
Oh
your
yeah,
mission
but
marker, and this area is unavailable. It's like, oh God's sake, give me a break.
and I think the other thing, and I'm gonna have to play Black Flag myself, so I will allow that now. So I'm not making any talk-ups for next week. I've got it loaded up in front of me. Free, and people don't talk about this, and they should, was the first game in the series to defog a map without viewpoints first. If you look closely at the map in free, it actually defogs as you walk around, and then you use a viewpoint to get more synchronization for
Okay,
the
yeah,
stuff around the map, which the other two games never did. You had to use
yeah,
viewpoints to unlock a map. And now everyone talks like, oh my god, Origins was the first game to do this. But from what I'm playing on both the remaster and the original, 3 was the first one to do this. And I think that's a nice little neat feature.
yeah. No, I agree. I didn't know that I could do. Don't remember that. It's been a while since I played it, so I'll take your word. You're playing it currently, so you're obviously aware of it. But no, that's interesting. Um, I think when this came out is when the engine that they were using was starting to show its age. It's, I think riding a horse through the frontier was one of the most frustrating things. Snagging on every branch, rock, or plant in sight. Just, you're nowhere near it, but the horse model somehow manages to snag on everything or just bolt off in one direction and send you flying. There were a lot, because it was a big game for the time, and there were, a lot of texture pop ins and pop outs and, frame rate issues, but that was, I think that was more, we're reaching the end of what this engine is capable of, kind of thing. It's not to say I didn't. I still thought that the living, breathing world was beautiful. The streets of Boston and New York are just alive with activity, and as we mentioned earlier, kind of the wilderness and the frontier is always going to be a joy to kind of run through.
And I think for me, and it's more prominent because I'm looking back at the original first remaster now, but I think replaying the original, which I have played a bit of the original because I got my partner's 360 to play it, I have noticed that actually the wilderness and frontier is more filled than the cities were. The cities had less
Yeah,
NPCs than the forest area did, but the world was actually a bit more darker, and the tones and the color palette used
no, it was a bit.
wasn't
It
as
was.
popping
It
as
was a bit grey.
Black Flag is,
I think that was. I
which
don't know.
is a
It is a
letdown.
bit grey, but I think tonally and thematically, I thought it was. I didn't have a problem with it.
I think for me, it's one of those games of you play that and you enjoy the frontier, and then, and I'm gonna, this is just a tie-in, but then you play Black Flag and you see how popping the grass was, how the trees look so vibrant. You just kind of think, this is a year apart. What if the frontier had this popping green trees in the autumn and this bright white
Yeah,
snow that
they
you could
certainly could
trudge
have done
through?
more color wise with the frontier. Definitely agree with that. The, the cities, I don't have
I
a
think that's
problem
just
with
the
them
thing.
being a bit drab and a bit grey, because that was probably, very accurate of the times and what was going on. But the frontier could definitely have stood to be more of this kind of lush green landscape.
So
No, hang
it's
on. We
getting to that
haven't even
time
talked
again
about
where
Connor
we
yet.
have to. Connor. Oh,
No,
I was trying to
no,
avoid
we're not
Connor.
avoiding that. No,
I don't want to get in
right. Well,
trouble.
I'll go then. Connor lacks the charm, the charisma, the soul of Ezio. He makes Altair look like a very exciting. He makes Altair look like a stand-up comedian. And but the problem is most of the side characters are like that as well. There's no kind of magnetism to any of the characters, which had a massive impact on the game for me. No,
And that's all we have time,
on.
folks. Please don't light your pitchforks. For me, if I'm going to be truthful, Connor, even now, gets me because I agree, but Connor, by the time it gets to him killing his dad and the ending, Connor shines. He comes into his own by that point. But because we've wasted half of the game on a build up for Haytham, and then most of the game is literally just split into 6 months later, the other day, you don't actually get that growth like you did in Assassin's Creed 2, where you watched Ezio go from playboy to mature. And that was one game, but in this one, it feels like they try to pack too much of a story into one game, that some of the characters had to be less fleshed out till the end. And by the final point, I like Connor. I say I think it was a cool combat wise. It was really cool. I liked how they were true to the time where they actually got him to speak Native American and English. That was a really nice touch. But he didn't have that heart and soul.
Yeah, and for
that he
me,
should have
that
had
has
from
a
the start.
knock-on impact onto the story. For a great story, you need a great storyteller. And unfortunately, Connor's not that. The story ends up being kind of average to good. But for me, it was a telling sign that the game was more fun if you took time out to do the side activities. You know, the story element of things used to be good enough that you didn't feel like you wanted or needed to do anything else, which just isn't the case in this game. I just feel like, well, we've kind of alluded to it, but if you stick to the story for too long, you start to get a bit frustrated with the kind of real linear style of things, you know, and being led down this path that you're not allowed to stray from. You know, it's the side activities and the kind of free roam world building stuff where this game, for me, really shines.
And I'm going to agree with you on that one. Like, the gameplay, I think if they went back and removed all the restrictions, I think it would be one of the greatest open world games of that time. And that's just saying something, just because of how immersive the gameplay was and how much there was actually to do in the open world. I think it could have rocked as one of the best open worlds of the time. And I will stand by that.
No, I
It just
think I'd
needs to be
agree with
more
you. I
open.
think I'd agree with you there. Got them right. We get to the feature we've had for. We didn't have it week one. I think we've had it every week since. But what's one particular highlight moment from Assassin's Creed 3 that sticks out for you?
To be honest, it's one that it's not a good one, but it's one that made me fall off my chair laughing. And that was, I was paying no attention to the game. I had 2 sequences left. I was getting chased by a bear, and I ran into a wall. That was, you cannot have this area to sequence 8. And now I had the choice, desync or death by bear. Desync or death by bear. So I just stood and got desynced because I did not want to mess with a bear. And it just made me laugh.
That's kind of a positive
so
from a
much.
negative. That's good. I like that.
Bear looked hungry. I don't want to be
For
food.
me, it's the one that always sticks out is Battle of Bunker Hill. You know, crossing the battlefield to assassinate John Pitcairn. It feels kind of as intense as you imagine a battlefield would feel, and the way it kind of sounds and feels, you know, it was just really immersive with obviously a satisfying payoff at the end. It's up to you.
Can I
It's your
change my
highlight.
answer? So
Excellent
it's going to be
response.
review score times. Luckily, we're still standing after last week's review, so we're in good stead.
I'll
Who
go,
wants to kick this week's
people
off?
might be surprised by my score. No.
Is it a 1?
For me, Assassin's Creed 3 gets a 4 out of 5. Because I've not, I don't feel like I've been overly kind in areas about this game, but it is, for what it's just, I love it. I love the game. I still do. I've played it. I don't know how many times I've played it. The original I've still got. I've got the remaster. I'm gonna replay it again soon because I just want to. For once in the series, I enjoyed all the side activities more than the actual story missions, and it was those moments that kind of elevated the game to a real high standing for me. I thought the story was okay, if not kind of extremely memorable, but I think the good moments in this game, they are so good and so well executed that it was a game that I just thoroughly enjoyed when it released, and I have continued to enjoy, and will be still enjoy in the near future when I play the remaster again.
Well, if we're going to go for a first, drum roll, my score is 4. And for the first time, we've actually got a unanimous score. And the reason I give it 4 is purely that I love the game. I can't deny I have a few nil-niggles, especially because I was getting worn out with the objections, but that's a personal thing. But nothing's more satisfying than rope darting a convoy from a tree like Predator. And as a kid, I watched the original Arnold Schwarzenegger Predator film about 2 months before this game came out, and you cannot deny the utmost joy to be up a tree like a predator.
Did
just
you make
picking
your own
people off one by one
when you were sat up in the tree? You can.
Can I say no? No. I think I did a little. But it just showed how much joy I had in the game. The game, to me, is the reason I bought the season pass for Odyssey. I just wanted to play the remaster because I wanted a more vibrant and more beautiful frontier to explore, because I really want to get my own back on the annoying raccoons that kept running away from me. Stupid raccoons. So this week will be a 8 out of 10, the highest in the series. Which I bet you any money people next week will probably be a high one.
There'll be a short stay at the top, I imagine.
So I hope you enjoyed this video. Good, it's one of them evenings, and a little surprise for you. I can't say much. As the Assassin's Order, we've got to keep things secret. Don't compromise on brotherhood and all. We are counting down from 1.8k listeners, which is an all-time high, to 2k listeners. Because once we hit 2,000 listeners, we'll be dropping a surprise onto our social media. It'll mainly Twitter and Facebook, which I'll link in the channel description. But no matter how much you bribe me and Josh with cookies, we will not tell you what the surprise is.
I was going to say, what cookies are they?
Unless it's chocolate cookies. If it's chocolate chip, we might have a hard time with this one.
You can name my firstborn as well as find out what the secret is.
So you heard it, folks. No cookies. No cookies for any of us. So just wait patiently. It will all come soon.
Yeah, I like it.
I think you will like it. I like it. But... Right, so tune in next week for Assassin's Creed Deep Dive Episode 6. Technically Assassin's Creed 4, but, we're not counting it.
Thanks, guys.
And thank you all for listening.